Dr. Jonathan West had spent most of his life studying the human brain and its incredible abilities. As a top neuroscientist on Earth, he was known for his groundbreaking work in understanding how the brain interacts with the rest of the body. But nothing in his career had prepared him for what lay ahead when he received the invitation to visit Baron Zalor, an alien ruler from a distant star system. The Baron was famous, not just for his wealth but for his strange sense of humor. Rumors said he liked to play cruel jokes on those who visited him. Jonathan, though intrigued, was also cautious. He had heard of the Baron's eccentricities, but he could not refuse the offer. It was a rare opportunity to engage with one of the most powerful alien families in the galaxy. When Jonathan arrived at the Baron's sprawling estate, he was greeted by luxury beyond imagination. Towering structures made of shimmering, unknown materials, floating gardens, and strange alien creatures filled the grounds. The air smelled different, thick with an aroma that Jonathan could not identify, yet somehow felt calming. Inside the estate, Jonathan was led through vast hallways that twisted in unusual ways. He passed through rooms with alien artifacts, each one more bizarre than the last. The walls seemed to hum with an energy that Jonathan couldn't explain. He marveled at the architecture, but his mind was always focused on the task at hand, meeting the Baron and understanding his intentions. Finally, he arrived at a large, ornate door, behind which the Baron waited. The door opened with a soft hiss, and Jonathan stepped inside. Baron Zalor was seated on an elevated throne, his tall figure draped in intricate robes. His alien features were sharp, with pale blue skin and eyes that glowed faintly. There was a certain authority in the way he carried himself, but it was matched by an unmistakable mischievousness. "Dr. West, welcome to my home," the Baron said, his voice smooth and formal, but there was an unmistakable hint of amusement in it. "I trust you've found our home to your liking." Jonathan bowed respectfully. "It is magnificent, Baron. Truly unlike anything I've ever seen." The Baron chuckled, clearly pleased. "Ah, yes, I do enjoy surprising my guests. But I have something far more interesting for you to see today." He snapped his fingers, and a pair of servants appeared carrying a floating platform. On the platform lay a young woman, her body limp and unmoving. Jonathan's eyes widened in shock as he realized that the woman was paralyzed. "Allow me to introduce you to my daughter, Lyra," the Baron said, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "She has been a test subject of sorts. I thought it would be amusing to give her to you. You are, after all, a great doctor. Perhaps you can fix her." Jonathan's heart sank. Lyra's body was completely still, her face pale, and her eyes closed. She looked fragile, her long, dark hair cascading around her like a veil. Her condition was unlike anything Jonathan had encountered before. As he examined her, he saw no obvious signs of illness. There was no injury that could explain her paralysis. Her muscles were intact, but they weren't responding to any command from her brain. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The Baron was treating his own daughter like an object, a mere tool for amusement. Jonathan was both horrified and curious. "I don't understand," Jonathan said, stepping closer to Lyra. "What happened to her? Why is she like this?" The Baron shrugged casually. "It's simple. She was involved in an accident many years ago. I had the technology to heal her, but I chose not to. Instead, I decided to leave her in this state. As a test. Let's see how long she can survive like this. It's been quite the joke, I must say." Jonathan couldn't hide his disgust. "You left her like this on purpose?" The Baron's smile widened. "Of course, it's a challenge, don't you think? But I do tire of her. I've decided that I'll hand her over to you. You're a scientist, aren't you? Fix her if you can." Jonathan looked down at Lyra, who was completely unaware of the conversation happening around her. He could feel her presence. There was something about her that seemed different. It wasn't just the paralysis. There was something deeper, something more mysterious that he couldn't quite put his finger on. He took a deep breath and turned back to the Baron. I will help her, but not for you, not as part of some cruel game. I will help her for her own sake. The Baron laughed, a deep, rich sound that echoed through the room. Oh, I'm sure you will. But remember, Doctor, I didn't ask you to come here for free. Your reward will be the honor of solving my daughter's little puzzle. I look forward to seeing what you can do. With that, the Baron stood and gestured to a door on the far side of the room. You may take her to your quarters. I'll have her brought to you later. Perhaps you'll discover her true potential. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. He didn't trust the Baron, but he had no choice. He had come here to help, and he was determined to do so, no matter what it took. As the servants carried Lyra away, Jonathan felt a strange sense of determination growing within him. He would not be a part of the Baron's sick game. He would find a way to heal Lyra, not just for her body, but for the hidden potential he sensed within her. He followed the servants, a new resolve building in his heart. He didn't know what kind of experiment he was walking into, but one thing was certain. Lyra's future, and perhaps the future of humanity, depended on him. Jonathan followed the servants through the winding hallways of the Baron's estate, his mind racing. He had never expected something like this. He was used to dealing with complex neurological conditions, but this was different. There was no clear cause for Lyra's paralysis, no obvious injury or disease to explain her condition. As they reached the small, quiet room that would be her temporary quarters, Jonathan felt a strange pull toward her. He had been handed a puzzle, one that would test his skills, his patience, and his moral boundaries. But there was something more. There was a spark within Lyra, something hidden beneath her motionless body that made Jonathan believe she was capable of far more than anyone, especially her father, had realized. The servants placed Lyra gently on the bed and left the room, closing the door behind them. Jonathan sat beside her, carefully observing her still form. Her face was peaceful, but her eyes remained closed, as if she was lost in a world of her own. He reached out and placed his hand on her forehead, feeling the coolness of her skin. Her pulse was steady, her breathing slow but regular. There was nothing physically wrong with her that Jonathan could detect. What troubled him most, though, was the sense of calm he felt in her presence. There was something about her energy, something beyond her paralyzed state. Jonathan had spent his life studying the human mind, yet this alien mind was unlike anything he had encountered. "Why are you like this?" he whispered, not really, expecting an answer. For a moment, there was silence. Then, to his surprise, Lyra's lips parted slightly. "You're asking the wrong question," she said in a soft voice. Her words were barely audible, but they were clear enough for Jonathan to hear. He sat up straighter, his heart racing. He had expected silence, not a response. "You can hear me?" Jonathan asked, his voice filled with wonder. He was shocked. The Baron had told him that Lyra's mind was shut off, that she couldn't communicate. Yet, here she was, speaking to him without moving a muscle. "Yes," Lyra replied, her voice still weak, but there was a clarity in her words. "I can hear everything. I've always been able to hear." Jonathan blinked, taken aback. "Then, why haven't you spoken before?" Lyra's eyes fluttered open, but she didn't look at him. Instead, she stared at the ceiling as if she were looking beyond the room, beyond the walls. "I was never allowed to. My father, he wanted me to be silent, to be still. He wanted me to be a thing, not a person. And so, I learned to be quiet." Jonathan felt a pang of sympathy. He had heard enough stories of alien cruelty, but nothing had prepared him for the depth of the Baron's cruelty toward his own daughter. to silence her, to keep her locked in her own mind for years. Jonathan couldn't imagine what that must have been like. But what Lyra said next stunned him even more. "I am not just paralyzed," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "I am restricted. My father did this to me on purpose. He believes that if I am broken, I am useless. But he is wrong." Jonathan leaned forward. His curiosity piqued. "Restricted? What do you mean?" Lyra closed her eyes for a moment as if gathering her thoughts. "I have a power, Dr. West, a power that he is too afraid to understand. My mind is stronger than my body, stronger than anything he could ever imagine. But he shut it down. He did something to me, something that keeps me from using my full potential. But I can still feel it. It's there, waiting." Jonathan felt a shiver run down his spine. He had heard rumors about alien races with extraordinary abilities, telekinesis, mind control, the power to manipulate energy. But this was different. Lyra wasn't just talking about some simple talent. She was describing something far more complex. She was saying that her mind could reach beyond her physical limits, that there was a hidden strength within her that even her father couldn't control. "Why didn't you tell anyone before?" Jonathan asked, his voice gentle. "I couldn't," Lyra replied. "For years, I didn't even know what was happening to me. I was taught to believe I was broken, useless. My mind was locked away, just like my body. I tried to fight it, but it only made things worse. My father didn't want anyone to know the truth. He wanted to keep me as his tool, his plaything." Jonathan's mind raced as he processed what she had just revealed. The Baron had not just paralyzed his daughter, he had tampered with her very essence. He had locked away her potential, perhaps out of fear that she might one day surpass him. Jonathan's initial anger toward the Baron began to grow, but he pushed it aside. He needed to focus on Lyra. She was the key to everything now. "Lyra, I don't know what your father did to you, but I can help you," Jonathan said, his voice firm with determination. "We can find a way to unlock your mind. We can free you from whatever restrictions he placed on you." Lyra's eyes flickered with a hint of hope. "You believe me?" Jonathan nodded. "I believe you, and I believe that together we can fix this. We can uncover the truth, and maybe we can change everything." Lyra gave him a small, tired smile. "I hope you're right, Dr. West. I really do." Jonathan sat beside her for a while longer, his mind working through the possibilities. He knew this wouldn't be easy. The Baron had likely used alien technology to block her abilities, to restrict her. But Jonathan had faced challenges before. And now, for the first time in his career, he had a chance to unlock something truly extraordinary. He was no longer just helping a patient. He was on the brink of a discovery that could change the fate of not just one person, but potentially all of humanity. He stood up and paced the room, thinking. There were resources on the Baron's estate, advanced technology, alien tools, that might help him in his task. But he also needed to think carefully. The Baron would never approve of Jonathan's plan, and if he found out what Jonathan was doing, there would be consequences. But Jonathan was no longer concerned with the Baron. He had seen something in Lyra, something that went far beyond her paralysis. She was a person with limitless potential, and Jonathan was determined to help her reach it. "Tomorrow," he said, more to himself than to her. "Tomorrow we begin." The next morning, Jonathan returned to Lyra's room with a renewed sense of purpose. The quiet, peaceful room was a sharp contrast to the storm of thoughts racing through his mind. He had spent the entire night reading through the alien data the Baron had provided, searching for any clue about what could be used to unlock Lyra's hidden abilities. Jonathan had always been a man of science, focused on facts and logic. But this was different. Lyra wasn't just a patient with a neurological disorder. She was something far more complex, and the more Jonathan learned, the more he realized that her potential could change everything. When he entered the room, Lyra was already awake, her gaze fixed on the ceiling. She hadn't moved, but Jonathan could sense her awareness. There was something about the way she held herself, an inner strength that he hadn't noticed before. "Good morning, Lyra," Jonathan said, trying to keep his voice calm. "How are you feeling today?" Lyra's eyes flickered towards him, her expression unreadable. "I feel the same," she said quietly. "Still trapped." Jonathan nodded. "I know, but we're going to work on that. I'm going to try something different today, something that might help unlock the potential you've been hiding." She didn't respond immediately, but Jonathan could see the curiosity in her eyes. For the first time, there was a spark of hope in her expression. "I've been reading through some of the research," Jonathan continued, "and I think your mind might be able to control much more than we've realized. I don't know exactly what your father did to block your abilities, but I think there's a way around it." Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly, as though trying to focus on his words. "What do you mean? How can you help me?" Jonathan hesitated, unsure of how to explain. "Your mind is different, Lyra. It's more powerful than you know. Your telepathic abilities, for instance, are far beyond anything I've ever studied. But what I think is happening is that your mind is being suppressed by something. There's a barrier around your abilities. And I think that if we can find a way to break that barrier, you can start to use your full potential." Lyra's brow furrowed. "And what exactly is this barrier?" Jonathan sighed. "It's a kind of mental block, a defense mechanism that your father placed in your mind. He didn't want you to access your true abilities. But the good news is, we can try to break it down. I think I can help you access the power that's been locked away." Lyra was quiet for a long moment, clearly processing his words. Jonathan could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to believe him. But years of being treated as less than human by her father had left her skeptical of others' intentions. "I don't know if I can trust you," Lyra said softly, her voice tinged with doubt. "I've been locked away for so long. It's hard to believe that anyone could help me." Jonathan leaned closer, his voice gentle but firm. "I understand, Lyra. But I promise you I'm not like your father. I don't want to control you or use you for my own gain. I just want to help you. I want you to be free." There was a long silence before Lyra nodded. Slowly, she lifted her hand from the bed and reached out toward Jonathan. The gesture was small, tentative, but it was the first movement she had made on her own since Jonathan had met her. His heart swelled with hope. "I'm willing to try," she said quietly. "But I'm scared." Jonathan smiled reassuringly. "It's okay to be scared, but we're in this together. We'll take it one step at a time. Over the next few hours." Jonathan worked with Lyra, using a combination of advanced technology and his knowledge of human and alien neuroscience to stimulate the neural pathways in her brain. He applied gentle electrical pulses to her body, hoping to encourage movement in the muscles that had long been dormant. But Jonathan knew that this wasn't just about the body. It was about unlocking her mind. As he worked, he began to notice something strange. Lyra's brainwaves were much stronger than he had expected. Her neural activity was intense, far beyond what a normal person or even an advanced alien should be capable of. It was as though her mind was trying to break free from the confines that had been placed on it. Jonathan adjusted the settings on the equipment, increasing the frequency of the pulses. Slowly, Lyra's fingers began to twitch. Then, her hand moved, lifting slightly from the bed. Jonathan's heart raced. "Lyra, can you feel that?" Lyra nodded, her face contorting in concentration. "Yes, it's strange, but it feels right." Encouraged, Jonathan continued to adjust the equipment. Over time, Lyra's movements grew stronger. She was able to move her hand fully now, and soon she was able to lift her arm slightly. "This is incredible," Jonathan muttered to himself, his scientific mind racing. He had expected results, but nothing like this. Lyra wasn't just responding to the treatment. She was surpassing his expectations. "I feel more awake," Lyra said, her voice filled with wonder. "Like I'm finally coming to life again." Jonathan smiled, proud of her progress. But there was still so much to do. He could see now that Lyra's potential was limitless. Her mind was powerful, far beyond what anyone had believed. The telepathic abilities she had spoken of were just the tip of the iceberg. Jonathan was certain that with the right guidance, Lyra could become something truly extraordinary. As the day wore on, Lyra's movements became more fluid. She sat up in bed, her legs still unresponsive, but her arms moving with growing strength. Jonathan knew that this was just the beginning. He had only unlocked a small part of her potential, but the possibilities were endless. "I think you're ready for the next step," Jonathan said, his voice full of excitement. Lyra looked at him, her eyes wide with curiosity. "What's the next step?" Jonathan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to the advanced equipment he had been using. He could see now that Lyra was ready for a deeper connection, one that would push her abilities even further. But first, he needed to be careful. The barriers her father had placed in her mind would not be easy to overcome, but Jonathan was determined to help her break free. "I'll show you," he said, his voice full of quiet confidence. As the days passed, Jonathan and Lyra continued their work together. Slowly but steadily, Lyra's strength grew. What had started as a faint twitch in her fingers had blossomed into full control over her arms. She could sit up and move, albeit with effort. Jonathan knew that her physical recovery was just one piece of the puzzle. Lyra's true power lay in her mind, and unlocking that would take time. But what worried Jonathan was the Baron. The more Lyra regained her abilities, the more he felt the Baron's presence looming over them. He had seen the way the Baron treated his daughter, not just as a joke, but as a tool. Jonathan knew the Baron would never tolerate Lyra's progress for long. The power she was beginning to unlock was dangerous to the Baron's control. One evening, as Jonathan was preparing for another session with Lyra, a message arrived from the Baron's estate. The letter was written in an elegant alien script, and Jonathan's heart sank when he read it. The Baron demanded that Jonathan bring Lyra to him immediately. He wanted to see the progress that had been made and expected Jonathan to report back on her recovery. Jonathan could feel the tension building in the air. The Baron didn't care about Lyra's well-being. He only cared about control. He had no interest in allowing her to reach her true potential. If Jonathan complied with the Baron's request, it could be the end of everything they had worked for. "Lyra, we need to talk," Jonathan said, looking up from the letter. He saw her sitting on the bed, her legs still stiff, but her hands moving freely as she practiced small movements. She had become more confident in her abilities, but there was still a long way to go. "What's wrong?" Lyra asked, sensing the change in Jonathan's voice. Jonathan took a deep breath. "The Baron has ordered me to bring you to him. He wants to see how you're progressing, but I don't think he's going to be happy with what he sees." Lyra's face tightened, her brow furrowing. "He doesn't want me to succeed, does he?" Jonathan shook his head. "No, Lyra, he doesn't. If he sees how far you've come, he'll try to stop it. He doesn't want you to have control over your own mind, and certainly not your body. He's afraid of what you might become." For the first time since Jonathan had met her, Lyra looked angry. She clenched her fists, her fingers tightening into the palms of her hands. "He's always treated me like I was broken, like I didn't matter. He's the one who did this to me, and now he wants to stop me from becoming something more. I won't let him." Jonathan could feel the power in her words. He had never seen Lyra so determined, so full of fire. He knew she was right. The Baron had created this situation, and now it was up to Lyra to break free from it. "I can't let him control you anymore," Jonathan said firmly. "You've come too far. You've unlocked something inside yourself that's far more powerful than any of us could have imagined. We can't let him take that away." Lyra stood up, her legs unsteady but determined. With every step, she grew more confident, the strength of her mind guiding her actions. Jonathan watched, amazed by her progress. She was no longer the broken, fragile figure he had first met. She was becoming something far greater. "I won't go back to being his prisoner," Lyra said, her voice low but filled with conviction. "I won't be a joke to him anymore. It's time for me to take control." Jonathan felt a surge of pride. He had seen Lyra struggle, but now he was witnessing her transformation. She was no longer the helpless daughter of a cruel baron. She was becoming her own person, someone who could stand up for herself and others. And in doing so, she was challenging everything the Baron had built. "We need to make a plan," Jonathan said. "We can't just go to him and hope for the best. He'll try to take you back, and if we're not careful, he might have us both locked up. We need to be prepared." Lyra nodded. "I'm ready. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm not going to let him control me anymore." The next day, Jonathan and Lyra began preparing. They spent hours discussing their options, coming up with a strategy. They would have to be careful. Any sudden movement, any sign of rebellion, and the Baron would take action. But they both knew it was time to fight back. Jonathan had gathered all the knowledge he could about the Baron's estate. He studied the alien technology, looking for weaknesses in the security systems. He even began working with Lyra's telepathic abilities, teaching her how to focus and use them to manipulate technology. It was a slow process, but they were making progress. With each passing day, Lyra grew stronger, her mind expanding beyond anything Jonathan had ever imagined. "I can feel it," Lyra said one evening, after a particularly intense training session. "My mind is starting to reach further. I can sense the technology around me. It's like I can control it even if I'm not touching it." Jonathan smiled. "That's it. You're learning how to connect with the world around you. You're not just healing your body, you're learning to control everything." Lyra's eyes sparkled with excitement. "It's like a whole new world is opening up, and I'm ready to take it on." But as the days passed, Jonathan grew increasingly uneasy. He knew that the Baron would not be easy to defeat. The man was powerful, both politically and technologically, and as much as he hated to admit it, Jonathan knew that he couldn't defeat the Baron on his own. "I can't do this without help," Jonathan confessed one night, his voice heavy with concern. "We need allies, people who believe in what we're doing." Lyra looked at him thoughtfully. "We'll find them. You've taught me how to think for myself. Now it's time for us to find others who want to fight for what's right." It was clear now that their fight was no longer just about Lyra. It was about breaking free from the Baron's control, about showing the galaxy that no one, not even a powerful alien ruler, had the right to suppress someone's true potential. "We're not going to let him win," Jonathan said, a new determination in his voice. "We're going to take a stand, together." The night was quiet, but tension hung thick in the air. Jonathan and Lyra had spent the last few days preparing, gathering every piece of information they could about the Baron's estate. They knew it was only a matter of time before the Baron called for Lyra, but they weren't about to walk into his trap unprepared. Lyra had grown stronger with each passing day, but the real challenge lay ahead, breaking free from the Baron's hold once and for all. "We need to move fast," Jonathan said, as they sat together in the small room where Lyra had been staying. "The Baron won't wait long, and we can't afford to waste time. If we're going to do this, we have to be ready." Lyra nodded, her expression serious. She had come a long way since Jonathan had first arrived, and with every passing hour, she felt the power within her grow. Her mind, once suppressed and weak, had become a powerful force. She could sense the world around her in ways that no one had expected. Jonathan had taught her how to use her abilities to control machines, to manipulate the technology around her, but Lyra's potential was far greater than even she had imagined. The telepathic connection she had with Jonathan had deepened. She could sense his thoughts before he spoke them, and in turn, he could feel her emotions, her hopes, her doubts. They were connected in a way that transcended simple communication. Lyra had become a force of her own. And it wasn't just her mind that had grown stronger. Her body, too, was starting to respond. She could walk, even run, though it took effort. But her greatest strength lay in her mind, the key to unlocking her true potential. Jonathan stood up, his eyes filled with determination. "It's time to put our plan into motion. We'll need to be quick, and we'll need to work together. The Baron has underestimated you, Lyra, but he won't make that mistake again." Lyra smiled, a fire burning in her eyes. "I won't let him stop me. I've already spent too long in his shadow. It's time for me to stand up for myself." Jonathan gave her a nod of approval. The time had come to confront the Baron, to show him just how powerful Lyra had become. Together, they would take control of their own futures. The night of their plan, Jonathan and Lyra made their way through the Baron's estate under the cover of darkness. The estate was massive, filled with towering walls and complex security systems. But they had studied every inch of it, learning its weak points and how to bypass them. Jonathan had used Lyra's abilities to manipulate the technology, disabling security cameras and unlocking doors without a single sound. They moved quickly, making their way to the heart of the estate, where the Baron's private chambers were located. Jonathan could feel the pressure building in his chest. He knew that if they failed, it would mean disaster, not just for them, but for anyone who dared challenge the Baron. "This is it," Jonathan whispered, looking at Lyra. "Are you ready?" Lyra nodded without hesitation. She could feel the energy in the air, the weight of what they were about to do. It wasn't just about freeing herself anymore. It was about breaking the cycle of control the Baron had imposed on others like her. She was no longer just the paralyzed daughter of a cruel ruler. She was a leader, a symbol of hope for those who had been oppressed. They reached the Baron's chambers, where 2 guards stood watch. Jonathan quickly disabled their weapons with a subtle gesture, and the guards fell unconscious without making a sound. They were inside. The Baron's chambers were as grand as everything else in his estate, filled with priceless treasures and alien artifacts. At the far end of the room, a large window overlooked the stars. The Baron stood in front of it, his back to them, staring out into the vastness of space. "So you've come," the Baron said without turning around. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "I knew you would try to defy me." Lyra stepped forward, her movements graceful and confident. "You've had control over me for too long," she said, her voice steady. "It's time for that to end." The Baron turned to face her, a cruel smile on his face. "Do you really think you can stand against me, Lyra? I created you. You are nothing without me." Lyra's eyes flashed with anger. "You didn't create me. You imprisoned me. You took my life away. But you can't take my mind. I am not your prisoner anymore." Jonathan stepped forward, standing beside Lyra. "She's right. You've underestimated her, Baron. And now it's time to pay for that mistake." The Baron's smile faded, and for the first time, Jonathan saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He had never expected Lyra to grow so strong, so independent. He had never imagined that she would defy him, not like this. "You think you can stop me?" the Baron sneered. "I am a ruler of galaxies. You are nothing." Lyra raised her hand, and suddenly, the room was filled with a crackling energy. The air seemed to shimmer around them. Lyra's mind was focused, her powers unleashed for the first time. She reached out, her thoughts connecting with the Baron's mind. He could feel the pressure building, the weight of her power pressing down on him. "You are nothing," Lyra repeated, her voice filled with the force of her telepathic abilities. "You've held me back for too long, but now I am free." The Baron staggered back, his face contorted in shock and fear. He tried to fight back, but Lyra's mind was too strong. She had broken the barrier he had placed on her. She could feel his thoughts, his weaknesses, his fear. And with a final push, she took control, not of his body, but of his mind. "You've lost," Lyra said, her voice unwavering. "This is the beginning of a new era, one where no one will be controlled by fear or cruelty." With the Baron defeated, Jonathan and Lyra stood victorious. The Baron's reign was over, and the galaxy would never be the same. Lyra's true potential had been unlocked, and there was no telling what she could accomplish now. But one thing was clear. She would never again be a prisoner, never again be silenced. As they left the Baron's chambers, Jonathan turned to Lyra, his heart swelling with pride. "You did it. You really did it." Lyra smiled, the fire in her eyes still burning brightly. "We did it. Together." And with that, they stepped into the future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they had changed everything. The Baron's defeat was only the beginning. After Lyra took control of his mind and ended his reign, the galaxy was left in a state of uncertainty. The Baron had ruled with an iron fist, his influence reaching across many worlds. But now, without his cruel grasp, the balance of power was shifting. Jonathan and Lyra stood together in the quiet aftermath of their victory, unsure of what to do next. The Baron's estate, once a symbol of his dominance, now felt empty, hollow. But as they walked through the grand halls, Lyra's steps were lighter, her mind clearer. She had freed herself from the chains her father had placed on her, and in doing so, she had set a new course for the future. "We did it," Jonathan said softly, looking at Lyra. "But now we have to figure out what comes next. What happens to the galaxy without the Baron?" Lyra turned to him, a thoughtful expression on her face. "The Baron was just one man, Jonathan. His empire was built on fear, and it will crumble now that he's gone. There are others out there who believe in peace, in unity. We just have to find them." Jonathan nodded. "You're right. We can't rebuild the galaxy on our own, but we can be part of the change. You've already shown the universe what's possible. People will follow you." Lyra smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I never wanted to be a symbol. I just wanted to be free. But now I realize that I can't turn away from what's happening. I can't ignore the suffering of others." Jonathan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone. You've already proven that you're capable of more than anyone ever imagined. But you don't have to carry the weight of the galaxy on your shoulders." Lyra's gaze drifted toward the stars outside the window, her thoughts distant. "I know, but I can't ignore the people who are still trapped, the ones who still need help. I have to make sure that no one ever has to go through what I did." Jonathan understood. Lyra had always been more than just her physical limitations. She had a fire in her soul, a desire to help others, to make the universe a better place. And now, with the Baron out of the picture, there was nothing standing in her way. Over the next few weeks, Jonathan and Lyra worked together to rebuild what the Baron had destroyed. They reached out to allies, people who had suffered under the Baron's rule, and began to form a new alliance. It wasn't easy, and the work was slow, but they were determined. Every step they took was a step toward healing, toward creating a world where no one would ever have to be controlled or oppressed. Again, Lyra found herself becoming a leader, not just because of her strength, but because of her compassion. She listened to the stories of those who had been hurt by the Baron's rule, and she offered them hope. She didn't promise easy answers, but she promised that things would change. And with her mind, her power, and her unwavering belief in herself, she began to unite people across the galaxy. One day, as they stood on the balcony of the Baron's estate, looking out over the stars, Lyra turned to Jonathan. "It's not over," she said, "but it's a start. The universe is vast, and there are so many people who need help. I can't fix everything, but I can make sure that no one is ever forgotten again." Jonathan smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "You've already done more than anyone could have ever imagined, Lyra. You've changed the world." Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "We've changed it, together." The Baron's fall had marked the end of one chapter, but it also marked the beginning of something greater. Lyra was no longer just a paralyzed daughter of a cruel ruler. She had become a force for good, a symbol of hope for those who had none. Her journey was far from over, but she knew that as long as she had people like Jonathan by her side, she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. In the years that followed, Lyra became a leader of the new alliance, one that focused on peace, equality, and understanding among all species. She worked tirelessly, using her power to connect with alien species, to help rebuild the relationships that had been broken by years of distrust. Her telepathic abilities allowed her to bridge gaps between races, and she became a key figure in the new Galactic Council. Jonathan, too, played an important role. As a scientist and advisor, he worked alongside Lyra, helping to develop new technologies that would improve life for people across the galaxy. He never imagined that his journey would lead him to this point, but he was proud of the work they were doing. Together they had created a new world, one where no one would be forced to live in fear, where everyone had the chance to reach their full potential. And while Lyra's journey was far from over, she knew that she had already accomplished something incredible. She had freed herself, she had freed others, and she had proven that even in the darkest of times, there was always hope. The galaxy would never forget the story of the paralyzed daughter who became a hero, and her legacy would inspire generations to come. As the years passed, the alliance grew stronger, and the galaxy began to heal. Lyra and Jonathan continued to work side by side, their bond growing deeper with each challenge they faced. They knew that there would always be new obstacles to overcome, but they also knew that together they could face anything. And so, as they looked out at the stars, they knew that the future was bright. They had made a difference, and in doing so, had changed the course of history forever.